Hey everybody, welcome back to Canada's boxing channel. I hope everyone's doing well and having a good day. So over the last few weeks I've been going through lists. I've been going through lists of, first of all, the top 10 heavyweight boxers of all time, and that was the most comprehensive. I actually split it into 3 separate segments, and then I did the middleweights, which I managed to condense into 1 segment. Today I'm doing the light heavyweights, and I plan on working my way through the original divisions. Whether or not I'll get to things like cruiserweight, super welter, junior middle or not will depend upon God giving me time and my mood, to be perfectly honest with you. But today I'm going to talk about light heavyweights. Now, as always, the results you get out of the back end depend upon the metrics you use on the front end. So if you don't like this list, it's likely that you simply would be using different metrics to me to get to the end result. My metrics are, who they fought, who they lost against, the championship reigns, and I went over this extensively in my episode 1 of my heavyweights video. So if you want to know the full metrics, that's the video to go to. As always, this is not a fantasy fight league. So if you think that your light heavyweight would beat the top light heavyweight that I've listed, fine, fill your boots. It's your list. Likewise, nobody who's currently active is in the list, simply because their careers are not over yet, and we don't know. So, without further ado, let's talk about my top 10 light heavyweights of all time, based upon the metrics that I have used. Some of my favorite fighters didn't make the cut, and some of my other fighters, who I want to be higher, end up being a little bit lower than where I thought they should be. But that's the thing. Once you have your metrics, you plug your numbers in, maybe you can give yourself a wee bit of wiggle room, but the data is what the data is. So, number 10, Jimmy Bivens, who lived from 1919 to 2012. He was one of the best fighters never to win an official world title. He competed in the 1940s and 1950s, and he beat a whole bunch of Hall of Famers, including Ezzard Charles, Archie Moore, and Jersey Joe Walcott. At one point during World War II, he was also recognized as the top heavyweight contender. No title shot materialized, however. He was defined by durability, technical skills, and he was also equally at home in both the light heavyweight division and the heavyweight division. He retired with a record of 86, 25, and 1. He was finally inducted into the Hall of Fame, recognizing his incredible contributions to boxing. You will notice that many of the fighters that I am rating have lots of fights under their belts. That's one of the metrics, and it does lead to a bias towards fighters from yesteryear. Number 9 from my notes was a guy called Harold Johnston. Born in 1928, lived until 2015. A very technically sound fighter, competed from the 1940s through to the 1970s. Long career. Fought some of the best light heavyweights of all time, including a long rivalry with the old mongoose, Archie Moore. He won the world title in 1961 and defended it successfully until he lost it in 1963 to Willie Pastrano. He had textbook fundamentals, so the boxing writers of the time said. He had great defense and a very strong jab. He was often overlooked, and in fact, if you go to lots of other people's lists, you won't see his name. But he was one of the most skilled light heavyweights of his era and probably of any era. and he finished with a record of 76-11. Now, number 8, Tommy Loughran, who lived from 1902 until 1982, a master of defense. He won the World Light Heavyweight title in 1926 and he held it until 1929. He was known again, you read up on these guys, for exceptional footwork. He was also a great counterpuncher, and he had what we would now call great ring IQ. He could outthink his opponents. He knew what his opponents were going to do before they did. He often fought heavyweights despite being a natural light heavyweight, and he took on legends like Jack Sharkey, Max Baer, and the gigantic Primo Carnera. He retired with a record of 90, 25, and 10, and he proved himself like one of the best defensive boxers of all time. Number 7, John Henry Lewis. He was the first African-American light heavyweight champion, holding the title from 1935 to 1939. He was a slick and skilled boxer. He defended his title successfully before stepping up to fight Joe Louis in 1939. Joe Louis, of course, was the world heavyweight champion. He was unsuccessful in his attempt to wrest the heavyweight championship away from Joe Louis. And Louis actually stopped him, if my memory serves me right, in the first round. But at that time, John Henry Lewis, not Joe Louis, Lewis spelt with Lewis, already had poor eyesight. And he ended up retiring when he was really rather young. He retired at 25. But he had a record which you can't overlook. 103, 9, and 6. He was very fast, excellent counterpunching, and great ring IQ. And he's been inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame. Now, number 6 is one of my favorite fighters of all time. I was kind of hoping you would be higher, but it is what it is. It's a fellow by the name of Billy Conn. Now, Billy Conn was born in 1917 and he lived until 1993. He was a brilliant light heavyweight champion, known for speed, movement, and boxing IQ. He won the light heavyweight title in 1939. He dominated the division before moving up to heavyweight. His most famous fight came at heavyweight in 1941 against none other than Joe Louis. Joe Louis had a habit of destroying light heavyweights when they came up. But anyhow, with Billy Conn, it nearly was the other way around. Billy Conn did an excellent job. He was knocked out in the 13th round by Joe Louis. But he was on the way to winning, and then he sort of abandoned his game plan, and Joe Louis caught him and knocked him out. Billy Conn's career was interrupted by America's entry into World War II, and it never really recovered. But despite this, he remains one of the best defensive and, well, quite frankly, the best pure boxers in history. He finished a record with 64-11-1, and that upset, or near upset rather, of Joe Louis is considered one of the greatest performances that anybody has put forward in what ultimately became a losing effort. Another one that I can think of would be Jersey Joe Walcott getting knocked out in the 13th round by Rocky Marciano. Now, we move to number 5. Probably the best light heavyweight that I have seen with my own eyes in my lifetime. And you could make a case for him being higher. You could also make a case for him having actually been one of the top middleweights of all time. And that's Roy Jones Jr. He was born in 1969. Roy Jones is, of course, still with us. I would say Roy Jones Jr. is one of the most athletically gifted fighters I've ever seen. He dominated multiple weight classes from middleweight and he won the world heavyweight title. He won the first world title at middleweight in 1993. Then he moved up to super middle, light heavy, and finally heavyweight. He defeated John Ruiz at heavyweight for the WBA heavyweight title in 2003. But Jones's speed, reflexes, and style, like Jones did stuff that you shouldn't be able to do. He's one of those boxers who you look at and you think, how did he do that? It's a little bit like watching Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan played for the Chicago Bulls, or Tiger Woods when he won the 2000 US Open, or Wayne Gretzky when he was playing for the Edmonton Oilers. You know, it's like, you're playing a different game to everybody else. And that's where I think of Roy Jones Jr. He was pretty much unbeatable in his prime, and he held multiple light heavyweight titles for a number of years. He beat top opponents like Bernard Hopkins, James Toney, Virgil Hill. Once he moved down back from heavyweight to light heavyweight, however, his career declined. And truly speaking, Roy Jones Jr. simply went on too long, as indeed did many of these fighters, but Roy Jones Jr. is one that's sort of current within our collective memories. But despite this, he remains one of the most naturally talented boxers in history, and he retired with a record of 66-10. So Roy Jones Jr. is number 5 on my list of all-time light heavyweights. Number 4 is somebody who I thought should be number 5, and I thought Roy Jones should be number 4, but the numbers were what the numbers were. And that's no disrespect to this person. It's just that I thought personally Roy Jones should be a bit higher. And the person I'm talking about now who does occupy the number 4 slot is Michael Spinks. Michael Spinks, still with us, born in 1956. He was an Olympic gold medalist, one of the best light heavyweight champions ever. Unfortunately, if you talk to younger fans and you mention Michael Spinks, they'll think, oh, the guy who got knocked out by Tyson in 91 seconds. Yes, that Michael Spinks. However, the story is much, much more detailed than that. He dominated at 175 from the late 70s and early 80s. He unified the title, defeated top contenders like Dwight Muhammad Quay, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, and his unorthodox Spinks Jinx right hand made him a dangerous puncher. In 1985, Spinks moved up to heavyweight, where he defeated none other than the great Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes was one fight away from equaling Rocky Marciano's record. And everybody, including myself, I remember the fight very well, thought that Larry Holmes was going to prevail over Michael Spinks. It was not to be. Michael Spinks upset Larry Holmes for the IBF title, and he became the first light heavyweight champion to win a heavyweight title. Remember, a number of the other fighters we've just spoken about had tried, like Billy Conn, but they were not successful. Michael Spinks was. And because he was the first, he gets those a few extra points. He remained undefeated until he ran into Mike Tyson in 1988. And we all remember that, yes, 91 seconds, first round knockout, possibly Iron Mike Tyson's finest performance, to be perfectly honest. Spinks retired immediately afterwards. Spinks' record is 31-1. So he's only beaten once, and beaten by prime Iron Mike Tyson. Not the Tyson that lost to Jake Paul. I'm talking about Iron Mike, when Iron Mike was unbeatable. He cements his place as an all-time great. Now, number 3, a guy I've done a separate video about. Ezzard Charles. He lived from 1921 to 1975. He was one of the most technically gifted and underrated fighters in boxing history. Initially a light heavyweight, he never ever got a title shot, despite defeating legends like Archie Moore, Jimmy Bivens, Lloyd Marshall. Ezzard Charles moves up to heavyweight, where he won a world title in 1949, defeated Jersey Joe Walcott. But he wasn't the light heavyweight champion when he did so, so he doesn't become that first, right? Even though he competed at light heavyweight. He successfully defended his heavyweight title, including a victory over the aging Joe Louis in 1950. It wasn't really the same Joe Louis. Charles was known for precise punching, defensive skills, and intelligence in the ring. He lost the title to Walcott in 51. He challenged Rocky Marciano twice. He pushed the undefeated champion to the limit, especially in their, I think it was 1954 rematch. Charles retired in 1959. So I struggled because most of Ezzard Charles's glory came at heavyweight, but he was a natural light heavyweight. He retired with a record of 95, 25, and 1. Now, Ezzard Charles, of course, suffered with Lou Gehrig's disease, or was it CTE, right? And many of these great fighters suffer from the effects of repetitive concussive blows, however you want to describe it, neurological problems. But Ezzard Charles died early, earlier than life expectancy charts would indicate, and it was attributed to the fact that he had ALS, called Lou Gehrig's disease after the great baseball player Lou Gehrig. Number 2, who you could argue could be number 1. And if somebody says, oh, you've got it the wrong way around, this guy should be number 1, I'm not arguing with you. Very, very, very close. And that's Bob Foster, the Sheriff. He was one of the most dominant light heavyweight champions of all time. He won the world title in 1968 by knocking out Dick Tiger, and he held it until 1974, defended it successfully 14 times. He had devastating power, particularly in his left hook. It made him one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. He made attempts to win the heavyweight title, but he did struggle against the bigger men. He suffered losses to Joe Frazier, for example, and Muhammad Ali. And again, it's worth pointing out that you're a light heavyweight moving up, and in what era are you moving up? I take nothing away from the guys like Roy Jones Jr., who successfully did it. But there is a difference. If the heavyweight division is occupied by some of the greatest fighters the world's ever seen, your task is exponentially harder, right? And I think that's it's just like when, Billy Conn moving up, trying to take on Joe Louis. You've got a very, very dominant champion. Whereas, not taking it away from him, but Roy Jones Jr. moved up and fought Sean Ruiz. God, my brain is terrible. And an easier road to travel than moving up and trying to take on Muhammad Ali. However, getting back to Bob Foster, in his natural weight class, he was virtually unbeatable. He retired in 1978 with a record of 56, 8, and 1, and he remains one of the greatest light heavyweights ever. Could have easily been number 1. And within my memory, if I was doing my lifetime, he probably would. However, the other fellow who beat him out was also active in my lifetime. And that is the old mongoose, Archie Moore, who was born in 1916, lived until 1998. He had one of the longest careers in boxing history, fought from the 1930s to the 1960s. He is regarded as one of the greatest light heavyweights ever. He finally won the title in 1952 after years of being avoided. He defended his title 9 times and held it for nearly a decade. You can see why I struggled. Archie Moore, Bob Foster. Bob Foster, Archie Moore. Moore was also known for his battles at heavyweight. He challenged legends like Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali. His incredible knockout power, he had 131 knockouts, and defensive wizardry made him a unique fighter who could outthink and outpunch his opponents. He retired in 1963. This is why I say, if I'd done my lifetime, I would want to say Bob Foster, but I was alive in 1963, so I'd have to capture Archie Moore. So I'm kind of hooped either which way. And his record was 186 wins, 23 losses, and 10 draws. Just let that sink in. Just let that marinade. 186, 23, and 10. He later became a mentor to young fighters, including George Foreman. So there you go. Archie Moore is my #1 light heavyweight of all time. Now let me know in the comments section what your top 10 is. Feel free to pick holes in this. You know, the data is what the data is. It depends upon the metrics you use. And I'm not going to be offended if you say, oh my God, you didn't get my favorite guy in, or how could you pick that guy? It all depends upon what you use as your qualifying criteria. I don't think that you can say that any of these fighters doesn't deserve a place. And the problem is, if you have somebody who's not on this list, you know, it's like, wow, there's only 10 spots at the table. And I went through this with middleweights, because there's many people that I wanted to include. But you've only got 10 spots at the top table. So it's tough. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoy making it. I enjoy doing the research, doing the reading, refreshing my memory. In some cases, kind of going back and thinking, wow, I never realized, you know, that's the good thing about doing this. I know they don't get as many views as if I talk about somebody slapping an egg on someone's face, but trust me, as a content creator, it's a very rewarding exercise to do, and I really appreciate you all watching it. Please hit the like, thumbs up thing if you do like it. Please leave a comment. That's really one of the most enjoyable parts of having a YouTube channel, is reading your comments and answering them. And like, share, and subscribe. And tell your friends to subscribe. Sign up your dog to subscribe. Ask your wife to subscribe. All these things are helpful. Okay, most importantly, have a fabulous day, and thank you very much for watching. Cheers.